Nikki here. I'm here today to do my Book of the Month book club review for the book that I announced at the beginning of the month, No Time for Goodbye by Linwood Barclay. I did enjoy this book. It's not my favorite suspense thriller that I've ever read, but I still did enjoy reading through it. As I said, this is the book I'm doing for my Book of the Month book club, so this will be a spoiler-filled video. I try not to go too much in detail, although my book club questions will prevent me from not going into detail. And as I said already, this is a suspense thriller. I do quite enjoy these. I've read several of them before. One of my first book of the months was 99 Red Balloons, that also falls under this category. This book specifically, No Time for Goodbye, deals with the story of Cynthia. Her family disappears one night when she's 14 without a trace, without a note, without any sign of foul play as far as they can tell. They just disappeared entirely without a trace, and she's never heard from them since. Where we pick up, it is 25 years down the road, and it is Cynthia's life now as an adult with her husband and daughter, and she starts getting messages regarding the loss of her parents and her brother, and they're very chilling, and they kind of send her on this adventure slash like deep dive into rabbit holes in regards to what happened to her family. And that's just my general summary of the book. I'm now going to kind of move into my likes and dislikes as normal. I'm going to do 3 likes, 3 dislikes. It's just kind of the tempo I found works really good. I'll start with my likes. My first like is the pacing. I found it very effective. It was slower at the beginning, but as you found out more and got more information, that's when the pacing started picking up, when things started getting more intense as everything was coming to an end. And I really enjoyed that because it really kind of contrasted the high drama and high suspense at the end of the book with the beginning, where they're just like struggling with their day-to-day lives versus struggling for life and death situations. My second like was I enjoyed the tone that Cynthia had. I enjoyed it because it was consistent and it was trauma-based. And even if I didn't always necessarily agree with all of her decisions, all of her decisions were tied back to this abandonment of her by her family, regardless of whether or not they left of their own volition. And my third like was the ending. I thought it was pretty good. It wrapped up really effectively. And it used a really good twist. I didn't necessarily see it coming. I saw parts of it let me rephrase that. I saw parts of it coming, but parts of it caught me off guard. I really enjoyed that. I'm someone who pays a lot of attention to what I'm reading, so generally when there's a twist, I figure it out well before the end of the book. That's all I really have to say for my likes. I'm gonna move on to my dislikes. My first dislike was like the unnecessary drama that was added with the perspective of the person with criminal intent. You find out later it's Enid and Jeremy, but at the beginning you don't really know. And I thought the book would have been okay without it. It was adding drama when it was unnecessary, when the things that were taking place from Terry's point of view about his and Cynthia's narrative was more than enough to build the suspense for me. I found it completely unnecessary, and the first couple times I happened upon it, it completely pulled me out of the story because I was not expecting it. My second dislike with this book was when Terry started getting like weirdly hands-on. Like he went from wanting to leave it to the police or leave it alone to like going out with Cynthia's ex-boyfriend who's a convict and runs a gang, and then he gets just like really hands-on really quickly, and that's the only part that I didn't really enjoy. Him going from not involved to involved. If it happened differently, or with different characters, or was more involved with the police end, that would have been okay. It was just weird for him to go out with Vince and do it, and it wasn't super awful, it just wasn't great. And then my final complaint, which was probably the one that did it the most for me in terms of my dislike and my final rating of this book, and it was that I didn't really enjoy about the first third to a first half of the book. I had a really hard time getting into the characters. The story was really good, and the story was what was keeping me going. But as someone who really likes characters who are identifiable, relatable, or empathetic or sympathetic in some manner, I really enjoy those characters. And these characters, I spent most of the book just not liking. And part of it was just, they started off a little flat, for lack of a better term. Like All of the constructs were there to make them very dynamic characters in the beginning of the book, and it just was not, I guess, not explored as much as I would have liked to get into the characters, and I ended up just not enjoying the characters. I just can look at the book and say, I didn't enjoy these aspects of the characters. Despite the fact that Cynthia had a lot of trauma, some of the like more neurotic aspects of her personality were really grating, and I had a really hard time getting into. And there's a few social situations regarding Terry in the book that were getting me a little wound up and like gearing up to really hate him, even though he was coming off as a sympathetic, if somewhat tired and downtrodden husband. I was just like, I don't want him to do this thing because that is just a scum of the earth thing. And I didn't even really care for Grace, like their daughter at the beginning. It was weird. And after things started happening a little more quickly and the pacing started increasing, the characters started getting a little more of the kind of treatment that I wanted them to get, and it became way more enjoyable, and I ended up loving the ending, but just that first bit was just, it was really hard for me. And that's all I have to say about my dislikes. I will move on to my characters now. I'll talk about the family first. I'm gonna start with Cynthia. She is really like the main character in the story, although the story is entirely from Terry's point of view. She's traumatized because she was abandoned or left by her family, and they disappeared without a trace, and she never had any more contact with them. She lived with her Aunt Tess, who raised her kind of the rest of the way. And because of that, you can see those, like the trauma from that really like playing out in how she deals with her daughter. She's very protective of her. And there's just so many freedoms that she doesn't give her because she doesn't want her put in the position she was put in. And unfortunately, sometimes that made her very, very frustrating to read about. And part of that was just, I didn't have the same mindset because I don't have that same kind of trauma, and I'm not a mother. So I don't, like, the connection of those two things was very hard for me to relate to. Otherwise, Cynthia was pretty like interesting to read, but like the same way a car accident is interesting to look at, like it was very hard to read about her because there's just so much going on, and some of it was just so out of touch with reality, or seemingly out of touch with reality, that it was very hard to figure out whether or not she was delusional or these things were actually happening the way she said they were. Next, I'll talk about Terry. That is Cynthia's husband. The book is from his point of view. I started off not really loving his character, and by the end, I was pretty okay with it. It was interesting to use his point of view rather than Cynthia's point of view, but I think that was to kind of give it a bit of more root in reality, because he was a lot more grounded and tied to what was going on and less stuck in the loss of the family, which I think was, in terms of that, it was a good decision. But otherwise, it would have been nice to get some from Cynthia's point of view as well. He really just wishes Cynthia could heal, that they could move on, that they could allow their daughter to grow up a lot more normally. And as it goes, he kind of like buckles down and then gets very strangely hands-on, which took me by surprise the first time it happened. By the end, you're like, yeah, this is a man of action, not just a man of words. And it was nice to have that change in his character throughout the story. Next, I'll talk briefly about Grace. She's the daughter of Cynthia and Terry. She wants a lot more independence and a lot more of these other things. And as any typical 8-year-old, she does make a few decisions that scare her parents, just in terms of she's not where she's supposed to be. And so that results in the two of them panicking, and when they find Grace, she doesn't really have the same sense of impact as to what the situation's done, especially in terms of what happened to her mother's family. And then as the book carries on, in terms of the creepy things that are happening in their house. And then you have Aunt Tess. She was Cynthia's primary caregiver. She is just this super lovely old lady, and I love the interactions with her because she is the touchstone in that family. She is the center of that family, with those three people. Everybody loves her. She loves everyone unconditionally, and it's amazing with their interactions, and there's just something so warm and comfortable about her. That being said, I was a little upset with how her illness was explained. It was kind of implied that it was cancer, and as somebody who participates in that kind of career, I find it very odd that they're like, oh, we did all of these tests that say that you have cancer, and there's one test that says you're not. That test that came back is negative. They're gonna redo and they're gonna review all of the other ones. Yeah, just that part, that's the only part of her character I wasn't crazy about, and it wasn't even her. It was just like external forces explaining her illness, and it's like, it's not really how it would go. It shouldn't be how it goes. And now I'm going to talk about, for lack of a better term, the crazy characters. You have Enid, and I think Jeremy is the name of the son. And I don't know how to explain those two, other than they're very crazy and very murdery. I didn't enjoy when they were kind of doing like those, ooh, sneak peek into the criminal's point of view parts. I thought those were dumb. But once you actually met them, in the book, I loved their characters. They were very interesting, and they just like increased the suspense and drama of the situation 100-fold just by being there, and I loved it. And the other character I'm going to talk about is Rolly, who is Clayton, Cynthia's father's best friend. And you know, he accidentally murdered someone who he was paying for sex, except he didn't know he was paying for sex, guys. He thought they were just having sex. And then they staged it to look like a hit and run, because, you know, that was a good idea. And he ends up owing Clayton, and he does some favors for Clayton that ends up positively impacting Cynthia's life, even though Clayton can never come back and see her. So, you know, interesting twist. Part of the twist that I didn't see. And that's really all I have to say about the characters. And I will now move on to the Book of the Month book club questions. So per the usual, I have a handful of book club questions here. I'll go through them with you and just kind of give little brief answers to go with them. So my first question is my usual. Is the book plot-based or character-based? This one I definitely found more plot-based. It was definitely more of a whodunit than a character-progressed story. Although the characters did get more interesting as the story went on, they weren't the drivers of moving the story forward. Second question, what was your initial reaction? My initial reaction was frustration, because it was the first few chapters were the hardest, and I was the most frustrated with all of the characters involved, and I'm really glad that fixed itself as the story progressed. 3, what is your favorite chapter or scene? I would have to say my favorite scene specifically is when Terry challenges Rolly, and kind of they end up talking about the history and the stuff that what Rolly participated in and what role he played. And I really enjoyed that one. How did the characters change throughout the story? Well, a few of them got more dead and a few of them got more murdery, but overall, I really liked kind of the idea of healing, even if for most of it, you thought that Cynthia was losing her grip on reality. When you get to the end and you see that she is starting to heal and accept the situation and know who's lost, I really enjoyed seeing that part. So you do see them grow quite a bit, like Terry kind of knuckles under, starts getting things done, is a little bit less passive in terms of what's going on, and then they move forward as a family and deal with the trauma that occurred recently, and they deal with the past trauma, and it looks like they're going to move forward as a closer, more united family unit, and that was really nice to see. Don't always get that at the end of a thriller novel. How did you feel about the ending? I actually really liked the ending, even though Terry, Cynthia, and Grace didn't really have anything physically too negative happen to them, like nothing long-standing. I did appreciate that the ending didn't wrap up without loss, and despite not wrapping out without having loss occur, it also tied up all the loose ends really nicely and just really made the overarching plot in the story tie up and finish very well, and I really appreciated that. There really isn't anything I would change about the ending based on how the plot was written throughout the rest of the book. What was the pacing like? I think I kind of talked about this in my likes. I really enjoyed the pacing. It was a little bit slower at the beginning, so the first few chapters were like harder to get into as the story was developing, but then as the story developed, as the evidence came forward, the plot moved a lot more quickly to match the information we had and push forward, and I really liked the increased drama and suspense that added towards the end of the story as things were wrapping up quickly and you had to be very on top of what was going on to follow it. But it matched what Terry was doing. As he got more evidence, he followed it and realized that as the more evidence became revealed, he had to move faster to resolve the situation. I really liked that the reader got that same experience. If you could read the story from another person's point of view, which one would it be? I would really like to listen to Cynthia's point of view on this. You get the little little nugget of a chapter when she's 14, but honestly, this is her story, it would have been nice to hear from her point of view. Like I'd mentioned, it was nice to see just a little bit more of a grounded point of view through Terry, but it would have been nice to get some more of Cynthia's point of view, just because I feel like it would have been really nice to specifically understand what was going on in her head and not just what he assumes is or she communicates is. And my final question, would you read another book by this author? I would definitely give it a try because I do enjoy the thriller genre. Given how much I enjoyed this, however, if I enjoyed another book by this author only the same amount, I probably wouldn't read it again. I've read other thriller novels that I've enjoyed more, either the plot or the pacing or the characters. And while the plot was really good here for me, the characters just missed the mark a little bit, and that just decreased my enjoyment of the book because it took me so much longer to get into the book. As far as I can tell, there was nothing technically wrong with the book. It was just my overall enjoyment of it wasn't as high as I could have hoped. So I would definitely give another book a try. I just don't know if I would give it multiple books by this author a try. And that's really all I have for my book club questions. I will now move on to my quick wrap up and give you guys the rating. So my wrap up for it is that it was pretty good, and I definitely felt pretty okay with the characters by the end of the story. I really enjoyed the pacing and how it mirrored the events that Terry was going through, and that the pacing picked up as information became available and danger became more imminent. And I've talked about this a few times, I'm going to mention it here again. I did dislike how much I disliked the characters at the beginning, because there's writing a character and getting me to dislike them because you're supposed to dislike them, and then there's writing characters that I dislike that I know I'm supposed to empathize with on some level, and I just don't connect with them in any way. And despite not enjoying that part of it in that first half of the book, where that was really a large component of it, the story wrapped up really well. I enjoyed the endings, I enjoyed the twists, and the ending definitely increased the rating for me in this book. So with that, I will give you my rating. My rating for No Time for Goodbye by Linwood Barclay is 3 out of 5 stars for the reasons I listed above, and for the reasons I gave kind of in my likes and dislikes, and how it ended up balancing out in terms of my overall enjoyment. That's a wrap for my Book of the Month video, and I will see you guys at the beginning of the next month with my next book review. See ya!